Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Info Tap. I'm glad you made it. Here's this video, okay? I'm going to kind of front load it here for you so you understand where I'm going to go. The government shutdown, obviously, everybody knows, is not going to affect your VA compensation pay. And it's not going to affect your ability to go to the VA for any sort of medical services. But there will be impacts to the VA and other government agencies that you may have to deal with during the time of the government shutdown. Now, I'm going to the bottom line is look, there's more to life than just our VA compensation, right? We as a veteran population, we have other things going on, right? So I wanted to just shed a little light. I pulled up a couple of articles here. And a headline, right? So I like this headline because it's straight to the point. So federal government shutdown just days away with no deal in sight. So kind of grim. This was updated 12 minutes ago as of the recording of this video. So I'm doing this on what is today, the 29th. So midday on the 29th, here we are. And this was, like I said, just updated. Now, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to read you the other headlines here. A government shutdown impacts veterans in a few ways is the other headline. And the other headline is, here's how a government shutdown could affect you. Not as a veteran, you as a person, right? So what types of things could we be looking not forward to, but that we need to prepare for, right? So with that, let's hit the thumbs up for me, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. It helps out a lot. And if you're not a member, consider joining. It does help the channel immensely. And it also helps me to find you in the comments. Thank you to all you members. I appreciate it. And we have you kind of scrolling across the homepage of this site as well. So let's jump into it. All right. A government shutdown impacts veterans in a few ways. A government shutdown impacts veterans with benefits continuing, but outreach services pause, said the head of the VA. While many federal agencies will begin to shut down on October 1st if Congress fails to pass funding legislation to keep the government running. A government shutdown impacts veterans by pausing some programs and services. So, let's stop right there for a second. Anybody who says that you are not impacted at all and the VA's fully up and running is blowing smoke. The reality is that certain features will continue. And obviously they're kind of the most important to many of us, which is, hey, do I get my money every month and can I go to the doctor? Right? But what if you're a new veteran, right? Newly transitioned from the military and you're trying to get things going, or you have a new thing come up or what have you, and you're trying to get something done, are you going to be impacted? Potentially, right? So just important to understand that it's like everything, right? There's so much nuance in it that everybody's situation is going to be different. So moving on, while the Veterans Affairs Department is closely monitoring the situation in Washington, in case of a shutdown, there would be no impact on veteran health care, said the VA secretary as he told reporters when asked at a September 22nd press conference. Burials would continue at VA national cemeteries. VA would continue to process and deliver benefits to veterans, including compensation, pension, education, and housing benefits. And the board would continue to process appeals. Now, let's stop there. The board is only if you're pushing it to the Board of Veterans Appeals, the BVA, having your appeal viewed by a law judge, which many of you have done that, and maybe you're currently in the process, but it's good to know that they're continuing to process those. But you can also file claims, appeal claims, or an appeal for your claim decision internally to the VA through supplemental or higher level reviews. So just so you know, because it makes it sound like that's the only appeal process is the board, but there's 3 appeal processes, 2 within the VA specifically, and then 1 outside at the board. All right, moving on. However, he added, outreach services to veterans would be stopped. Public-facing regional offices would be closed, and many regular operations such as career counseling, transition assistance, and cemetery grounds maintenance would not be available. So, that's important to know. Under the VA's fiscal year 2021 shutdown contingency plan, the last public update available, the agency said that 96% of its employees would either be fully funded to work or required to perform certain functions during a shutdown, and that significant services include certain benefit functions under the Veterans Benefits Administration would continue. Some veterans services to be paused in a government shutdown. So stick with me, right? Because look, there's nothing worse than going, oh well, shit, I wish I would have known, right? This is what it is. This is knowing, right? This is having the information, whether you need it or not. You could be the resource for somebody else. So, some veteran services to be paused in a government shutdown. According to the plan, significant activities that would cease during a shutdown include VBA, Veterans Benefits Administration, Education Call Center, as well as all public and intergovernmental affairs functions such as national programs, special events, and tribal government relations. Which seems weird to me. For some reason, it seems like the last one, the tribal government relations, would probably continue just because there is some missing pieces in that connection. So, anyway. When asked about whether the Veterans Health Care Administration, so the Veterans Health Administration, would continue to hire and onboard new employees since some of the agency's human resources personnel would be furloughed, the VA Secretary said this is one of the areas the VA is looking at closely. The VHA, Healthcare Administration, part of the VA and the country's largest integrated healthcare system, has been aggressively hiring to reach a goal of increasing its workforce by 52,000 or 3% in preparation for a wave of veterans under the promise to address Comprehensive Toxics Act, the PACT Act. The new law that expands health care and benefits for those exposed to burn pits, Agent Orange, and other toxic substances. Soldiers to perform duties without pay in a shutdown. Unlike the VA, the Department of Defense is one of many federal agencies and the departments waiting on Congress to approve 12 appropriation bills covering fiscal 2024 by September 30th, by the September 30th deadline, and outcome few in Washington expect. Without that funding, the DoD would furlough about 800,000, that's a huge number, 800,000 civilian employees, but require some 2 million U.S. military members to continue to perform their duties without pay, although they would receive back pay once the government reopens, according to the DoD's September 12th shutdown contingency plan. The agent would not award new contracts during the shutdown, but contracts already in place would continue. The department will continue to defend the nation and conduct ongoing military operations according to the DoD's plan. It will continue activities funded with any available budgetary resources that have not lapsed, as well as expected activities such as those necessary for the safety of human life and the protection of property. Now, I'll tell you, when it comes to the DoD, I've been out for a while and out of active duty for a long time and out of the reserves for quite a while. And I kind of forgot about that whole working, not getting paid thing. I mean, we were paid so low anyway, right? But reading this makes me go, oh man, my son. So my son's in the Air Force, for those that don't know. And so I might have to shoot him a text and just say, hey, look, if things get funky, let me know. So just as a reminder to other parents out there or people that have loved ones in the military currently, that could be something that they're facing, and so they might need a little bridge help. All right, so other agencies would be impacted by a government shutdown. Tens of thousands of other non-essential federal workers from various agencies are also expected to be furloughed should there be a shutdown, as agencies partially close and some services reduced. Social Security would be impacted by a government shutdown. Say it again. Social Security would be impacted by a government shutdown. Now, look, hang on with me. I know this is long and it's just, and I drag things out and blah, blah, but It's a few minutes of your life. With 8,512 of its 61,869 workforce furloughed, but it would continue to send Social Security checks. So, like the VA, you're still going to get your check, but if you need anything else, you might have a hard time. Likewise, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid would be affected by a government shutdown, but continue to provide essential services, albeit with a reduced staff. That means that in the event of a funding lapse, Medicare and Medicaid programs and services, including the sending of Medicare payments, would continue. A government shutdown could also impact the Internal Revenue Service, which initially was expected to continue functioning as usual during a shutdown, but now reportedly may be partially shut with thousands of employees furloughed. The Department of Education contingency plan, last updated 2021, states that the basic operations, including the services and disbursements of federal student loans and Pell Grants, could continue for a very limited time during a shutdown, but then these operations could also experience some level of disruption. At a September 25th White House press conference, the press secretary was asked whether the October 1st deadline for student loan repayments could be pushed back given some looming shutdown. For now, people are expected to start paying student loans even in the event of a shutdown on October 1st. She also responded that if the shutdown occurs, we anticipate that key activities at the federal student aid will continue for a couple of weeks. However, if the shutdown lasts a few weeks, it could substantially disrupt the return to repayment effort. That concludes that article. Sliding over to this other one, here's how the government shutdown could affect you, just to give a little contrast with that last one. The U.S. government is set to shut down next week. So this one came out on the 25th. So unless Congress passes a deal agreement to pass a dozen spending bills before September 30th funding deadline, an unlikely scenario that has left many Americans anxious, wondering how a potential government shutdown would impact them. During a shutdown, the government can only spend money on essential services, such as those related to law enforcement and public safety. That means hundreds of thousands of federal workers won't receive a timely paycheck, while others would be furloughed, which could inflict severe financial hardship on some American families at a time when many are still struggling with elevated prices due to inflation and impeding student loan repayments. A government shutdown occurs when Congress fails to approve new spending for federal agencies which require congressional authorization each year to expend funds. As of Monday, Congress is yet to pass, and really that's as of today, Thursday, Congress is yet to pass any of the 12 appropriation bills that's needed to be signed into law to keep the government running, as House Republicans remain divided over top-line spending levels and various policy concessions. The last government shutdown occurred in December 18th, and in December 2018, when most government activity came to a halt for 34 days, the longest in modern era. It isn't just federal workers who will feel the effects of a shutdown. Here are some impacts of a federal government shutdown that will affect you. Federal employees and military personnel. If the government shuts down, tens of thousands of federal employees would be furloughed and sent home without pay. Those who are deemed essential workers, such as employees in public safety and national security, would report to work without pay. Once federal funding resumes, the government is required by law to repay federal employees and military personnel. Federal contractors would not be compensated for missed time. Each federal agency decides which services and employees are essential, which typically include law enforcement officers, national security agents, active duty military personnel, and federal prison guards. Members of the military and federal law enforcement, for example, would continue going to work, while civilian personnel working in the Department of Defense would be furloughed. Federal employees should note that those who work during a shutdown when they aren't supposed to could face fines or a prison term under the Anti-Deficiency Act. I never knew. National parks, public spaces, and airports, recreational facilities funded by the federal government would be forced to close, meaning travelers and tourists may be unable to visit national parks, facilities, or the Smithsonian museums in Washington during a shutdown. The National Park Services estimated that a 2013 government shutdown led to a $500 million loss in visitor spending nationwide. Some airports may also experience disruptions and delays, such as during the 2019 shutdown when air traffic controller workers basically called in sick and walked off the job type of stuff. I talked about that one before. Passports might be hard to get as well. So if you're looking to do any sort of traveling, vacations, go visit national parks, that type of stuff, you might have to rethink that. So that's important to know. Federal safety net programs, while food stamps and other nutrition aid programs would continue during a shutdown, federal agencies may have to reduce support after September 30th funding deadline if the shutdown persists for an extended period. The Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, WIC program, for example, which provide food and vegetable benefits, is already facing a funding crisis, with the White House requesting Congress to approve $1.4 billion in emergency funding for the program in late August. Let's see. The White House estimates that roughly 10,000 children would lose access to child care starting October, as disruptions in programs like Head Start would start to unfold. Disaster relief, with disaster relief efforts in Maui and Florida underway after recent wildfires and hurricanes, the Federal Emergency Management Agency has warned that its disaster relief fund is dangerously low and could be depleted if the government shuts down without approving emergency funding. Moving on. What remains open during the shutdown? Agencies that have already received funding approval or operate on a permanent funding basis would continue to operate as usual. For instance, the Postal Service and entitlement programs such as Social Security and Medicare would continue to run during a shutdown because they are funded by permanent appropriations that do not need to be renewed each year. Veterans Affairs benefits, including pension and disability checks, will also continue as normal under a shutdown. The Internal Revenue Service will continue as normal operations during a government shutdown, meaning the agency's 83,000 workers would not be furloughed due to funding approved through Congress last year. And then that concludes that one. So anyway, I know this was long, 18 minutes, here we are, but I did want to share with you so you have a little bit of more visibility, I guess, on some trickle kind of down effects of the government shutdown. So thanks so much. I really appreciate you. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.